Since 2010, Social Security beneficiaries have received 16 cost of living adjustments. Every single year, the Social Security Administration announced a COLA designed to protect your purchasing power from inflation. The Senior Citizens League's 2026 Loss of Buying Power report says that despite those 16 adjustments, the average Social Security beneficiary has lost 13.7% of their purchasing power since 2010. That is not a rounding error. That is more than $1 in $8 of real value gone while the program's stated purpose is to preserve it. Today, we decode exactly why that happened. The answer is in the formula, and it has been there since 1983. I'm Michael Bennett. Welcome to Retirement Watch. Today we are doing something I consider one of the most important pieces of foundational education we can offer on this channel, decoding the structural mechanism behind the Social Security COLA and explaining why that mechanism, despite functioning exactly as designed, has still produced a significant and documented loss of real purchasing power for the average beneficiary over the past 16 years. This is not political commentary. This is what the official data shows. Let me start at the beginning, because the COLA mechanism is one of those things that most people assume they understand, and most people do not fully understand. The cost of living adjustment was not always part of Social Security. For the first 3 decades of the program's existence, benefit increases were entirely at the discretion of Congress. If Congress passed a bill, benefits went up. If Congress did not act, benefits did not move regardless of what inflation was doing. That changed in 1972 when Congress passed legislation creating an automatic annual adjustment mechanism tied to inflation. The mechanism went into effect in 1975. Since then, Social Security benefits have been adjusted every year automatically, without requiring congressional action based on a specific measure of inflation. The specific measure used is the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers, the CPI-W. This is a monthly index published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The SSA calculates the COLA by comparing the average CPI-W during July, August, and September of the current year to the average CPI-W during the same 3 months of the prior adjustment year. If prices have risen, benefits increase by the same percentage. Here's the complete list of Social Security COLAs since 2010, so you have the full historical context. In 2010 and 2011, the COLA was zero, the first zero COLAs in the program's history, reflecting the deflationary environment following the 2008 financial crisis. In 2012, 3.6%. In 2013, 1.7%. In 2014, 1.5%. In 2015, zero again. In 2016, 0.3%. In 2017, 2%. In 2018, 2.8%. In 2019, 1.6%. In 2020, 1.3%. In 2021, 5.9%, the largest since 1982. In 2022, 8.7%, the largest since 1981. In 2023, 3.2%. In 2024, 2.5%. In 2025, 2.8%. Looking at that list, you might expect that purchasing power has been reasonably well preserved. There were 2 years of zero adjustment, but there were also 2 years of historically large increases. The cumulative arithmetic looks reasonable on paper. So why has purchasing power declined by 13.7%? The answer has 2 components. The first is the Medicare Part B premium, increasing faster than COLAs, automatically absorbing a portion of every adjustment before beneficiaries see it. I covered this in detail in our companion video on the 2027 COLA projection. The second component and the deeper structural issue is that the CPI-W does not actually measure inflation as experienced by Social Security beneficiaries. It measures inflation as experienced by a fundamentally different population. And the divergence between those two populations' inflation experiences has compounded over decades into a significant cumulative loss. Let me explain what the CPI-W actually measures, specifically the population whose spending patterns it tracks, the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers covers households in which more than half of income comes from wages and clerical occupations, and in which at least one household member has been employed for at least 37 weeks during the prior 12 months. The Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that this population represents approximately 29% of the total U.S. population. That population has a specific spending profile. The typical urban wage earner household spends roughly 33% on housing, 17% on transportation, including car purchases, gasoline, and commuting, 13% on food, 8% on healthcare, and the remainder on entertainment, clothing, and miscellaneous categories. Now compare that to the typical spending profile of a household headed by someone 62 years of age or older, the population that receives Social Security retirement benefits. The senior household looks fundamentally different. Housing remains significant at roughly 36%. Healthcare rises dramatically to approximately 15% of total spending, nearly double the share of working age households. Transportation falls significantly to approximately 14%. Clothing and apparel falls. Entertainment and dining out falls as well. The critical difference is healthcare. Senior households spend nearly twice the share of their income in healthcare as working age households. And healthcare inflation has historically outpaced general consumer price inflation by a significant margin. This matters because of how the CPI-W is constructed. Each month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics calculates price changes for all categories in the basket and then weights those changes by how much of their budget the reference population spends in each category. When healthcare prices rise, that increase receives a weight of approximately 8% in the CPI-W calculation, because that is healthcare's share of the wage earner's budget. But for the actual Social Security beneficiary, healthcare represents 15% of spending. The same healthcare price increase should be weighted at nearly double the rate in the beneficiary's real inflation experience. The opposite applies to transportation. When gasoline prices spike, that spike carries a weight of roughly 8 to 10% in the CPI-W. But for a retired senior who drives less and has no commuting costs, that same price spike has a much smaller impact on their actual budget. The result is that the CPI-W systematically understates the inflation that Social Security beneficiaries actually experience. And that understatement compounds year after year. Here is what most people do not know. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has been tracking a separate alternative inflation index designed specifically for Americans 62 years of age and older since 1983. It is called the Consumer Price Index for Americans 62 and older, the CPI-E, where E stands for elderly. The CPI-E uses the same price data as the standard CPI. It surveys the same stores, the same landlords, the same medical providers. The difference is in the weights how much importance is assigned to each spending category. Because senior households spend more on healthcare and housing and less on transportation and apparel, those categories receive higher and lower weights in the CPI-E. The result is a measure of inflation that more accurately reflects what a Social Security beneficiary actually experiences. Now, here is the key question. Has the CPI-E grown faster or slower than the C? CPI-W over the years since the BLS began tracking it? The answer is faster, consistently faster, in almost every year since 1983. When you compound that annual difference over 4 decades, the cumulative gap is significant. The Senior Citizens League has calculated that if the Social Security COLA had been tied to the CPI-E instead of the CPI-W since 1999, the average Social Security beneficiary would have received approximately $5,000 more in cumulative benefits over that period. For a beneficiary who has been receiving Social Security for 25 years, the TSCL projects the gap may be as high as $12,000. I want to be precise about something because intellectual honesty requires it. The CPI-E is not a perfect solution, and there are legitimate technical objections to it. First, the CPI-E uses a methodology that does not fully account for substitution behavior when consumers change what they buy in response to price changes. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has noted this limitation in its own documentation. Second, the CPI-E has a smaller sample size than the CPI-W, making it statistically somewhat less precise. Third, some economists argue that even the CPI-E understates the healthcare weight in senior budgets because it captures only direct out-of-pocket spending, not the healthcare spending that flows through Medicare and Medicaid on the beneficiary's behalf. I am presenting these objections not to dismiss the case for the CPI-E, but because giving you both sides of the analytical picture is what Retirement Watch does. The structural argument for a more accurate index is compelling. The technical implementation is genuinely complex. Now let me quantify the cumulative gap in concrete dollar terms. During the post-financial crisis period of 2009 to 2014, the years of zero or very low COLA's energy prices fell significantly, which reduced the CPI-W. Healthcare costs continued rising. The CPI-E weighted more toward healthcare and less toward energy, diverged from the CPI-W by its widest margin in this period. These were the years when the COLA was 0, 1.3%, and 1.5%, the years when beneficiaries received the smallest adjustments precisely because the index was most miscalibrated relative to their real expenses. For the median beneficiary, someone receiving approximately $1,070 per month in 2010, if COLAs had tracked the CPI-E since 2010, they would be receiving approximately $171 more per month today. Annually, that is over $2,000 of benefit value that the structural index gap has cost the median beneficiary. For lower income beneficiaries at the 25th percentile, receiving approximately $750 per month in 2010, the monthly gap is approximately $116 less. On a fixed income at that level, that monthly gap represents critical spending capacity for medication, food, and utilities. For the longest tenure beneficiaries, those who retired in 1999 and have been receiving benefits for 27 years, the cumulative gap is closest to the $5,000 figure the TSCL has calculated. Now let me be specific about who within the beneficiary population has been most affected by this structural gap. Women. Women live longer than men on average by approximately 5 years. Every additional year of life is another year of exposure to the compounding gap. A woman who retires at 65 and lives to 90 experiences 25 years of this compounding. A man who retires at 65 and lives to 80 experiences 15. The same structural flaw produces different cumulative impacts depending on longevity. The very old. The percentage of spending devoted to healthcare increases with age. A beneficiary in their 80s spends a significantly higher share of income on health care than a beneficiary in their mid-60s. For those in their 80s and 90s, even the CPI-E may understate the healthcare inflation they experience. Beneficiaries who rely exclusively on Social Security income. A beneficiary with substantial retirement savings has the ability to absorb purchasing power erosion from other sources. A beneficiary whose Social Security check is their sole income has no such buffer. The 13.7% losses absorbed in their grocery budget, their heating bill, and their prescriptions. Now let me decode the legislative options that have been proposed to address this structural issue. I am presenting these options factually without advocating for any of them. Option 1, the CPI-E Act. Multiple bills have proposed switching the Social Security COLA calculation from the CPI-W to the CPI-E. Switching to the CPI-E would increase Social Security benefit payments over time. The Congressional Budget Office has estimated various versions of this proposal to increase Social Security program costs by approximately 3 to 5% of total program expenditures over the long term. Proponents argue this corrects an underpayment. Opponents argue that any increase in program costs accelerates trust fund depletion, ultimately harming future beneficiaries. Option 2, the CPI-BEST, a newer proposal that attempts to address the technical limitations of the CPI-E, while still correcting for the systematic understatement of senior inflation. It would use a more sophisticated methodology that accounts for substitution behavior, includes a broader senior sample, and weights healthcare spending based on both direct and Medicare-covered costs. It has been proposed as a compromise that produces higher COLAs than the CPI-W, but lower than the CPI-E, with lower fiscal impact. Option 3, the chained CPI. This option goes in the opposite direction. The chained CPI accounts for substitution behavior and generally produces a lower inflation reading than the CPI-W. Switching to the chained CPI would reduce COLA increases relative to the current calculation. Its proponents argue that the budget savings are necessary to preserve long-term Social Security solvency. From a purchasing power standpoint, it would worsen the 13.7% buying power loss the Senior Citizens League has documented. I am not telling you which of these options is correct. Each involves real trade-offs. What I am telling you is that all three are under active discussion, and the choice among them will have a direct and permanent impact on the real value of your Social Security check. Here are the signals to monitor. Watch for any mention of CPI-E, CPI-BEST, or chained CPI in the debate over the Bipartisan Social Security Commission Act of 2026. Any commission producing a solvency plan will almost certainly address the COLA formula. Watch for commission hearings and report releases at congress.gov. Watch the Bureau of Labor Statistics quarterly CPI-E releases at bls.gov/CPI/CPIE.htm. The divergence between the CPI-E and the CPI-W right now tells you how the buying power gap is currently evolving. Watch the Senior Citizens League's quarterly updates at seniorsleague.org. Their annual buying power report is the most rigorous, non-partisan analysis of this issue available. Before I let you go, here is what you can actually do. First, understand your own inflation rate. The average buying power loss is 13.7%. Your personal rate depends on your spending patterns. If you spend a large share of income on healthcare, prescription drugs, or housing, your personal inflation has almost certainly exceeded the COLA. Second, use your My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount to project your future benefit under current COLA assumptions. Understanding the official projections gives you a baseline for your financial planning. Third, contact your congressional representatives. The choice among these index options is a legislative decision. Your senators and representatives vote on Social Security legislation. You can reach them at senate.gov and house.gov. Fourth, read the Senior Citizens League's annual buying power report at seniorsleague.org. It is free. It is updated annually, and it is the most comprehensive nonpartisan analysis of this specific issue available to the public. I am not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. These are official resources for your own research and civic engagement. Here's the bottom line. The Social Security COLA is calculated using an inflation index designed for urban wage earners, not for retirees. Retirees spend more on healthcare and housing, less on transportation and manufactured goods. There is an index that measures senior inflation specifically. It has existed since 1983. It has almost always grown faster than the index the law uses. The cumulative gap between those two indexes, compounded over 16 years, is the structural explanation for why the average beneficiary has lost 13.7% of purchasing power despite receiving a cost of living adjustment every year. That is not political commentary. That is what the official data shows. If this gave you a clearer understanding of the structural issue behind the buying power problem, please share this video with someone who is receiving or approaching Social Security benefits. This is foundational knowledge, and it matters. Subscribe to Retirement Watch and turn on notifications. I'm Michael Bennett. Thank you for watching Retirement Watch, helping seniors understand their benefits.